I'm more the talker than Anoʻi is. She's more the doer, but we'll jump back and forth a little bit. We call it the Waiwai o Ka Wai, which is Waiwai is value and it's capital, it's all of that. Wai is water. So addressing meaning management, Moʻolelo of Water. And in all honesty, I never knew what SENCER was till I got here today. I mean, I had the website, had the idea. What I was told is you're going to be talking to educators about how to incorporate this kind of material into what you're doing and teaching on all fields. I couldn't have been more excited. Yes, let's. I was just going to note the institute that we are now called the Institute of Hawaiian Language Research and Translation. It was just set up last year. We're actually system-wide. So we're trying to develop engagement on all campuses. We're accessible. Okay, that would roll us. And to introduce what we'd want to talk about, the big issues on water. You're trying to address it from any angle. I loved the radial concentric circles coming down to a core, because we're definitely in that. So we want to look at water, the where and how of water. How does Hawaiian indigenous kind of mindset, and to think that that's a single piece is a sort of a misguided conception. We look at a continuum of change and adaptation, both pre-contact and post-contact. There are actually developments, it continues to flourish. So the idea of where and how on water can be pinpointed in time and it can be spread out. Teaching water, where is water being taught now? You're all teachers. How are you incorporating water? We want to build some of the resources. We are dowsing for data. How's that? And then hopefully we leave you with, let the information flow. Okay. So to open this, the word water, when you say water, it's actually wai or kai. And the distinction is wai is potable, fresh water, and kai is all the rest. So the ocean is kai, but as soon as you make gravy for your pork chop, that's kai too. Yeah. Anything where water contains so much that it's no longer fresh water is kai. So even, well, there's lots of examples, but there's very, very descriptive language that covers that. And there's also Hawaiian is a very poetic language and lots of use of metaphor. So lots of that gets detailed. So here we have a very poetic piece that's giving very descriptive frame. And some of you will be familiar with this piece. I want you to watch a 2-minute video. It's actually subtitled, so I don't know how clearly you'll be able to see the subtitles. I'm hopeful. He's chanting about the water of Kaane, one of the 4 great gods. That was Keali'i Raichel, and we popped that in there because he's more decorative than us. But it's also the notion of, if you can wrap your head around, there is a different perspective on the world. Once you know it's there, you can look for detail. Now there's a perspective that's presented in the chant that shows that there's a religious aspect to water, and there's a physical aspect to water. And even those of you who are familiar with this chant might be surprised at how clearly it's laid out. That the first 2 verses actually simply describe the boundary of this island chain. And Hawaiians, of course, come up through the Pacific. There are other island chains. The water of Kaane only exists here. So it goes from the sunrise at the far east, the sunset at the far west. It carries, each one of these is the far end of Nihoa Isle. And where the Pai o Pua, not where the cumulus clouds are, but where they bank up on the horizon. So that's where the water of Kaane is in the physical world here. This one says, okay, take note of all of the forms of precipitation that happen on the mountain, on the ridges, in the valleys, or down in the base of the valleys, this piece. This one says all of the water forms that exist over the sea that affect the land. So it's everything from rising mists to clouds, rains, storms, but it only lists here the rain clouds, the auli, the aoparapano, popo ulakane. And then Here it is. It's all in the groundwater, that it's underneath the soil, that it comes up through the springs. It becomes the drinking water. It becomes the running water. So it's actually, this is very well framed. It's a poetic geography of water.
Can I make a clarification?
Yeah.
Something happened with the formatting. So this is just the bottom half and that's the top.
Oh, shocking. Yeah. It's actually, it's beautifully laid out in the poetry. Our piece of it fell apart, of course. I wonder if we'll have some formatting challenges, we'll see. If you just look up water, this is the Hawaiian dictionary site, and if you just look up water, you get some 200 and some entries where wai is a freestanding word. So whether it's in a phrase or that's really a lot, okay, to dig through. And each one of them good. But if you just look around where you are, wai is embedded in so many of the place names that you might know and love if you live here, and you would know and love if you're visiting. Places, Waianae, Waiau, Waipi'o, Waimalu, all of those are different forms of water. And many of you would know that. You knew Waipahu was about water, or Waikiki. Does everyone know Waikiki? And why it's Waikiki and not Waikiki? Do you know the difference? Ki means to spurt. So kiki means to spurt plenty times in one place, and ki means to spurt here and there. So spouting water in multiple spots, Waikiki. Okay? Oh, which is why it gets two long I's. Okay. But some of the names around us you might not recognize as water names, and because they have the word spring embedded in it, or they have the word pool embedded in it. So a bunch of other names that we are both Oahu-centric. So the first two columns are all Oahu names, and then we did other islands. Okay. What I was saying is that traditional systems, there was use of water. If you're aware of, what Hawaiian cultural life was like, whether you were in a single residential household or an ali'i royal compound, there would be household use. And that would include, and not a great deal of water consumption depending on where you were, but drinking, cooking, bathing, manufacture of, whether you're making kapa or whether you're making olona, the household goods. And there's some ritual use of water, but not a great deal. And I don't know how familiar you are with, I spent time in Samoa, in Western Samoa, where water was an issue. They did have lots of rainwater, but not much in the way of usable, wasteable water. So everybody bathed every single day. But everybody bathed with a lava on, with 2 saimin bowls of water. Basically, that was the allotment. So you can imagine that, what would happen in a household would vary by where you are. Oh, and you can get clean. You can try this out at home, by the way. 2 saimin bowls of water. 1 for get wet, 1 for rinse. Okay. Fishing, well, freshwater fishing, of course, would be to hold fish, whether they're being contained for, waiting to dine, or whether you're actually running a fish pond. But also even the shoreline fish ponds required fresh water to maintain the salinity there. So those are always built around a freshwater input. And then the biggest piece of it would be farming, of course. Much farming dealt with, what rain you get is what you get. And there's much tradition on how to handle and how to prepare for the rain. But there were places where there's irrigation as averse to like lo'i farming. And I have an example of, there's lots of data. You have more data. We're not here necessarily to deliver data, but there's lots of observations on how these work. This from the very simple to run a lo'i system. Everybody knows that's a flooded terrace. They often get translated as like taro patch. But I saw in one of the resources, and it might be in Bob's article, called a taro lake or a taro pond, because it's fully banked in with the ability to rise and lower the water levels. But they can go from just, have the stream run this way all the way down, to some of these are incredibly complex. That would still be a simple one. Doesn't this look like a drawing for a new residential neighborhood? Basically it is. And it's interesting that, they're always tailored to the geography where they are, the resources that are in place. But Hawaiian does geography in a concentric set of identifiers. And so you're on the island of Oahu, we're in the moku of Kona, we're in the Ahupua'a of Waikiki, and it would keep going down, keep going down. There are ili within the Ahupua'a. It keeps going down. Each one of those raised or watered beds, flooded terraces, would have its own name. So like we have on the campus here, Kaupapalo'io Ka Wai is the collective of about 8 taro terraces that have been restructured. Each one of the 8 has its own name. So you can actually just say, oh, where is she? She's Kona, Waikiki, Ka Wai, Tuapapa. And I would know where someone was within about a 12-foot radius. Not bad. That's, Hawaiian can be very, very specific. So, but this kind of data, I think, it's well documented. It's discussed. I touched Robert's paper here because in prep for me giving the talk, he said, well, if there's anything you can use from this. Yes, I can. You've got a lovely resource base. So your bibliography is great, and it leads me to other bibliographies where this is concrete data. Like I say, and we're not preparing alternate facts. We're opening up alternate resources. So we're not going to do the scientific data, but we looked at, with the data that's in place, where is it being taught? Where are you teaching about water right now? And where will that head? We're with Hawaii Nui Akea, is the School of Hawaiian Knowledge. And actually within the whole school, there's very little that would focus on water. In the language side, there's not a single class that actually focuses on water. In the Hawaiian studies side, where things are taught in English, for the most part, there are 4 different concentration areas within their school. One of them is Malama'aina, which a part of that would be dealing with water resources. There's 2 particular ones. One is Mahi'aikalo, is the cultivation of taro. And then the Hawaiian geography and resource management always has to deal with water. I don't know what percentage of it. But the Hawaiian language, we have the potential. So if someone came to me and said, well, I want to do my master's on water resource management as it's described in the past, we could handle that easily, but it's not in place at this point. So where is it in your department and your field? Let's see what we could, if we were to expand this, this is the kind of thing I would want to use to expand it. Next. Is because we've got, in the last 15 years especially, we have opened up the body of Hawaiian language resources that had lain dormant mostly for a century. And so the more that has been opened up, the richer we see it. And the first group that has really dived in on this is mostly the science folk. They see what had been an unavailable 114-year record of actual citizen science, observation of the world around. So by fluke, Hawaii is different than anywhere else. And what we can do with this can't be done anywhere else that I know of, where a body of native language production, whether it's in publication, handwriting, government docs, has lain dormant and now been brought back out because the population that created it, there was no other place where literacy went so fast in such a contained unit, and they all got into writing. They all invested and put this down in writing. While Hawaii was becoming very, very literate, the population was shrinking. And there became a mindset of, write down the things that are important, we may not be here. And there were many laments that were published saying, oh, this woman has died. She was the great storyteller. Those of you who still have the stories, please publish them. And they did. The newspapers especially were embraced as a national repository of knowledge. And there's lots of examples, and that's a different lecture. But where we pulled out, where they've said in 1860, those of you who are knowledgeable, put it here. They'll need it in 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, and 130 years. I mean, they knew that, change was happening so very fast. One of the ways to secure that was to document it. So Hawaiian language newspapers started in 1834. But Actually, the reading and writing starts in 1820, so manuscript exists before that. They go up until 1948. There's still viable newspapers published, 100 different ones. They're this size, they're all national. This is really, there are newspapers all around the world, but every newspaper here was national, where compare that with, in Tahiti, every newspaper was mostly a church bulletin. In New Zealand, they were often regional newsletters, in effect, and a lot of control over what got put in the paper. Where here, they were actually a cash endeavor. By 1860s, this became business, and you could publish really anything. There were public mores, you know, you don't criticize the sovereign, you don't do things that are overly sexual, you know, have some taste. This is a Victorian world. But almost any topic could be brought up and reported on. So really, the content of these is very, very different. But the amount of them too. The newspapers came to be the size of the Wall Street Journal. They're usually only about 4 pages. But they were everything that the internet is to us today. Sharing information, documenting information, jokes. It's all in there. It's all in there. 1.5 million pages of material if we typed it all out. When I say that it lay dormant for nearly a century, we've only incorporated maybe 3-4% of that 1.5 million in what we're writing today. Only about that much of it has been extracted, translated, and published. So 95-96% has never been used. So it's all this lovely raw material that connects part of it to your field. There's also Hawaiian language manuscripts, which you've got a very literate population. Some of the manuscripts ended up going into the newspapers. A quirk of this is some of the newspapers ended up being produced as manuscripts. There were people who followed the things going in the newspapers so carefully that they would keep a journal text of a story or of events in a certain area and keep that for years. Although the newspapers themselves, at the end of a year, the publishers would bind your newspapers. That's how important they were. I put my newspapers in the yard to keep the weeds down, okay? So they were a very different content and a different value. There's also lots of Hawaiian language government records. The Hawaiian Kingdom was a Hawaiian language kingdom. There was English language records to some extent, but basically Hawaiian was the language of the time. So they look like this. Oh, they span this. So because people in 1840 are writing about accounts from 500 years earlier, and some of them mythological accounts. So it actually spans almost from origin up until about almost statehood. So that's a huge block of data. The folks who were studying El Nino, and when they say, you know, we had the worst El Nino 2 years ago that we've on record, and when I find out that I'm older than the record, you know, so when those folks found out that there's actually observations that go back to 1834 and talk about earlier times, they were really excited, and we've been diving in on that for about a year. So it covers quite a span. They look like this in different forms. These are the smaller ones. Manuscript material. Some of these people had the finest writing. I lament my ugly writing. And government docs in lots of forms. And again, sometimes government documents ended up in the newspapers. A lot of the government was actually proclaimed through the newspapers. So we end up, our focus has been on the newspapers. For the life of me, I can't remember what's coming next. So if we were to track historical change, so what I do is I have to break apart the idea of there's a traditional anything. Because tradition, the Hawaiian tradition is often change and adaptation. So being able to track that is worthwhile. So if we're looking for traditional kinds of direct access to water, shared access to water, direction and management, because if you live next to a stream, you can use it. But there's a konohiki who runs your district. So if multiple people need to use that resource, the konohiki will be the one who actually does the direction and management. And if some major public work needs to be made, like a way or Taro Fields, that would be under that kind of direction, and it would be, you know, collaborative and managed. Later on, over time, there's legislated use. Collaboration becomes formalized. There's licenses, there's agreements, codicils in property and whatnot, and lots of arguments in the newspapers about who is trespassing on water. So there's a rich bunch of there. But change over time from traditional systems of awai, lo'i, eliwai. There's new systems that come in, irrigation, pumping, diversion of water. These are all, so if you think of where you'd want to look, you'd know where you would look in the papers. Milestones that come to mind are Kikiaola is probably the first major irrigation ditch that was created. Ka Wai, said to be done by the Menehune in a night. And it's a stone-paved aqueduct. Major. So we just put that up there because then there's awai all over. 1848 is when they first started piping water into Honolulu, taking it out of the base of the taro field and bringing it here. And then real diversion, major diversion of water comes after the Reciprocity Treaty. They start to license large water diversion projects. And 1879, the first artesian well, which negates the need for diversion, right? You can just pull it out right there. So we thought if one of those was of interest to you, you could find that specific event, or you can find lots of things around those events. So this is about the Menehune Ditch, but it talks about the water, that there was apparently a great storm on Ka Wai, and the Menehune Ditch was destroyed, it says. Now, we still have it intact today. It's sort of been rebuilt in pieces. But this shows an account that it has been, they used the word tumbled, yeah? That the rocks had been washed loose. Now, I don't know that you can see any of that from the back, but it's just a report from Ka Wai that and it's an artifact from antiquity that was still running, but has now been broken. If they were piping water into Honolulu, you know that right away there'd be trouble with wastewater. So these are the new rules a few years later on wastewater in Honolulu. And it says whether it's your toilet pit, your dunghill, your sluices, wastewater pipes, pools, or any other thing is a public health hazard, we'll clean it and charge you. Makes it very, very clean. And then in the end it says, and by the way, from now on, all outhouses have to be 9 feet deep, 4 feet square, and lined. So it's changing the way that water is moving out as well. This precedes the major water diversion that went on after the Reciprocity Treaty, massive agriculture efforts with cane. This is actually a Chinese group is making an aqueduct to run the water from, Wai'ehu to Waihe'e? Oh, from Waihe'e to Wai'ehu, other way around. There's a growing market for rice. There's a Chinese community, there's a growing market for rice. Chinese are taking it on, they're moving water to a new area. This is a report on that. And it says, yeah, it'll work. It was done by W.P. Alexander, was one of the great surveyors here. And it says it's being done by experienced people. Don't worry, this will run. Now, we know that the first artesian well, which made James Campbell a really rich man, was 1880, and this is right after this, or 1879, I think we mentioned. Right after this, there's obviously an artesian well in Honolulu at the Marcus Place. So the artesian water from the pool at Marcus's Place in Pawa'a. Pawa'a is,
Like the Zippies.
Zippies at King Street.
Yeah.
So that area, Zippy's King Street, and Marcus's Place had an artesian well on the property, and that's where the foreigners are getting their water. Maybe there was a little, repugnance about the pipe coming out of the lo'i. Hard to say. This was just, we actually tripped over, pulled this out for the Ikewai research that we're doing. And it was an old account, so some of these go backwards. Kalaniʻopuʻu is actually the king of Hawaii Island when Captain Cook arrives. And this precedes the arrival of Cook, tells about Kalaniʻopuʻu going to Kalai, the south point of Hawaii Island, where there's one water source, but they're looking for, it's a big district. They're looking for water in a waterless land. So they ask the geomancers, which are, the scientists of the time. And this one geomancer, who happens to be a dwarf, says, yes, there's water here if we dig. It was here in the mythological times. The dog came to, it was a dog, sort of semi-demigod, came to drink the water, and Pele, the goddess of the volcano, zapped him, turned him to stone. So it redirected the water, now it's bubbling up out in the ocean. But if we dig here, this is where it'll be. He was called the dowsing dwarf of South Point. So this little story is what, I didn't include the next chapter where he gets killed because they didn't get to the water. Yeah, so, but at this point he's still well regarded. Yeah. So, okay. We set up the Institute of Hawaiian Language Research and Translation. Is actually only about a year and a half old, but it's like we've been doing the same thing for 15 years and we just gave it a new name and sort of empowered it a little bit. Because this was, as these resources unfolded, this was the work that started with individual organizations or people. So Sea Grant came to us 12, 13, 14 years ago and said, oh, come on, if you're looking at newspapers, there's gotta be stuff on fishing and on shoreline. And so we had started to say, oh yeah, there's this. So, and it's a team of folks started to find and deliver, so they had some materials. Out of that came the Joint Institute of Marine and Atmospheric Research. They said, there must be stuff. Okay, here's stuff, And so these projects have actually been going on for quite a while. A more recent one was the oceanography side of the finding the El Nino in the back. And then while these were delivering up some product, the College of Education said, can we have some of that to build our STEM curriculum? So that if they're doing a piece on winds, they actually build a curriculum that says, it's a Ka Wai high school. Here's a storm about wind on Ka Wai. And the kids in the class know all the place names, they might know some of the characters. And then they introduce wind that way. Then let's talk about wind on Ka Wai. They go to the Pele and Hi'iaka story, and she stands up and recites 300 wind names. And then they go into winds of the Hawaiian Islands, and now let's look at global winds. How does wind work? So to be able to use these as introduction points was real productive for them. And now we're heavily involved with Ikewai, the AppScore project. All of these intersect. So the stuff we did with Jaimar ends up pulling up things that are relevant to the Sea Grant folk. So this was a database. Jaimar asked us to look into weather. We found 4,000 articles and said, here. and that, what is called the Jaimar database, is still flying around. In the course of this, we 3 times increased the amount of searchable newspapers. So the Jaimar database was done when only 1/3 as much was word searchable, and much of this was done by manual search of microfilm images. So this could be increased easily today. But so we did this big block of material. Now we also culled from this, they ask in particular about that weather stuff. Do you have anything on a hurricane? On what we have a report in English of a bad storm on Hawaii Island. This is pre-Estelle, if everybody knows. Estelle was the hurricane that kissed Hawaii Island not too long ago, didn't hurt it. Pre-Estelle, there was actually legislation being proposed to drop hurricane insurance and the hurricane building codes for Hawaii Island, because they thought, the general public opinion was they were immune. It'd been over 100 years, nobody had ever seen a hurricane, oh come on, And why did they have to pay hurricane insurance if they don't have hurricanes? We don't have to pay volcano insurance, by the way, on Oahu, and they do. So they were feeling a little put upon until we pulled out 16 different articles on that one storm, and the science folk were able to extrapolate from the data we gave them to be able to mark the whole trajectory that the hurricane actually did a full force hit at Waipio. They could track its whole trajectory across the top of Hawaii Island. We have stuff on the impact throughout the rest of the island. It went to Maui, over Molokai and out to sea. The legislation was sundered, so it never went through. Hawaii Island was still insured 2 years later when Isel hit, and what was it, $20 million in damage was insured. Thank you. So sometimes it's very relevant. Yeah, no, we were very happy. Some of the Hawaii Island people are a little testy about that story, but you know, because they're still paying insurance. This is what we did with Sea Grant and what we've done with all the other projects. Sea Grant has been hosting a site where whatever we do get in translation is available to everyone. Our real push is for access. Whatever we can bring out, if you can use it in any way, we want to reconnect, re-articulate this historical information. And really, we just want people to be aware that it's there. That's a big piece of it. So these are all different categories where articles are available in English and in Hawaiian. So if you picked one, and I think we picked drought, is that right? Yeah. So, and there were 15 articles. If you're talking about water, drought is certainly connected. So here's an article on drought, and it has to do with the taro fields are going dry because they're redirecting the water for sugar cane. Foreign interest is already invading. This is Nawaiʻeha over on Maui Island. And what's interesting, this is 10 years before the Reciprocity Treaty, before Super Ag steps in. So there's already a tension going on with the redirected water is killing taro, boom, boom, boom. So this is an insider account on how that's moving. We had many articles that we had done for Sea Grant, and so some of those have been pulled out. This is and this was put out as a pamphlet. It's about 20 pages, 15 pages, something like that, because it was a really remarkable, detailed account of fisheries and how they had declined over time, how traditional fisheries were maintained. So it was a very useful piece, and we try and do everything in Hawaiian and in English. So the Ike Wai sort of just formalizes what we've been doing for a long time, but we stand as a portal for other, whether fields of study or agencies. So if they come to us and say, well, Ike Wai came and said, we want to do water. Okay, water, gotcha. So we have to define a set of what terms would we look for. And the reason to kind of get the notion of a native mindset is, where would I look for these things in a different cultural setting and a different historical setting? So we come up with what we can, and we do searches on those. Some of them are incredible. I don't know, I'm sure we can't see how many are in this, but this is a search for, what is that, dear?
Oh, this is on Punawai. We searched under Punawai.
Just the word spring, yeah? Freshwater spring. How many hits did we get?
2,184.
So 2,000 hits on that one word, and you saw the word list, right? So this could be a little daunting. And actually, it's not been fully incorporated in like the language departments because the students pull up something like that and think, I have to personally sift through 2,000 Google lines for this one word, and there's 40 words on my list. The one for Hawaii, I'm sure, was like 76,000 hits or something like that. So to be able to narrow that down, and 2,000 isn't as bad as it seems. I mean, once you know that's the topic you want, that might be a 20-hour task, is to walk through those and sift out there's really only 150 that we want. So, but doing it, we'll get it done. It takes time. We torture our grad students into just keep at it. Okay? So, but we'll search those, and that'll come up with the articles that we think are worthwhile. So we've selected some relevant, what looks like relevant materials, and that'll bring us up off the page, the actual article. From this, we'll then, so we've looked at them, we've said, yeah, this is good. We'll do just a summary of these. So those 150 that we pulled up, say that we went through them and maybe 110 of them. They actually look pertinent. So we're going to do a summary of each one of those. This is about water flow in North Kona, 1843. Boom, that's all it is. That's deliverable so that someone who's studying water flow in Kona can say, well, can I get these? And then we'll come back and we'll do full translations of them. The way that we operate is once we do a full translation for your department, the world gets it. So everything that we produce for you, that's our agreement, goes up on the web so that Bob Franco can use it and Ula can incorporate it. So we move from this to full public access. If you're looking at text examples, there's a bunch. These are just examples. Every one of them will have, where did they get the charts? Where did they get the data? What years were that stream flow about, et cetera, et cetera. But these are the ones that I want you to walk away with, and we'll have all of these. I guess, we'll leave you our PowerPoint so that you don't have to quickly memorize all of these. But I want to be able to just highlight, oh, and how are we on time? Are we just about there? Okay, because each one of these is a different sort of point of access. Ours on the top, that is the Institute of Hawaiian Language Research and Translation, hosted by Sea Grant. And we have all of the articles that we've translated in the course of these, but we also have other places to look for cool stuff, okay? Because Papa Kilo Database is hosted by OHA. It has 3/5 of all the newspapers ever printed are up there as digital images. And most of them are word searchable on at least a rudimentary basis. How's that? There's some really rotten typing went on. But it is what it is, and it's going to get better. And it's fabulous compared to when I started my work at this, and it's almost 40 years now. I was at a microfilm machine, which was considered high-tech, that had no printout. So you pick your microfilm of a particular newspaper for a particular span of years, and you hope to find the piece you want. And if you do find it, now you can write it down. It was a little bit low-tech. So I'm really excited about being able to go, water? 76,000? Yes, we go. Okay, so that's the biggest body of those. The second largest one is the two below that is Ulukau, which is hosted by Alulike. The middle one, vehevehe.org, is a dictionary, online dictionary, and access to multiple dictionaries so that you can, you don't have to be fluent in Hawaiian to be able to search through this. That's the amazing part of this. And you could, whether you've a little Hawaiian or no Hawaiian, you can look at an old newspaper and tell whether that's an advertisement or obviously some kind of a meaty article. And if it shows that your word that you're searching for came up 12 times, this might be the one to print out and go find a translator. That's easier than coming to the translator and saying, can you go look? Now we're being that nice translator block for the moment. We got permission, we got support, and we've got lots of encouragement to make this portal. So literally you can come to us and go, water? You can come to us and go, bestiality? I mean, you can, whatever, and we're there. But for the most, but on your own work, it's there. I'm just reporting it. Yeah. But the next NSF project is up. Okay. But even on your own, even in Alaska, you can take this and play with it. And by the way, I have family in Alaska, they'll help you. You can at least play with it and start to look at what is there. So there's more access than you might think. Ulukau also contains, it's a Hawaiian library, both in English and in Hawaiian. There's lots of the publications of the last century have been digitized and made available on the web. That's a very nice resource for us. The Legends book. Because many times the legends will have a reference to the thing you're looking for, whether it's a storm, a drought, water flow, a famous spring. It's amazing. And these are the English language legends, but they're, again, a doorway to get in. Nupepa-Hawaii.com is a random It's run by a single guy who fell in love with this resource, and every day he goes in and finds something that piques his fancy. And so it might be ice cream today, and it could be politics tomorrow. It could be the death of a priest. It could be, it's different every day. But over the last 3 or 4 years, he puts up an English and the Hawaiian, and he's created this huge body of random data bits that are totally accessible to the public. So a nice resource, actually. Awakonahiki does lots on maps and a lot of Hawaiian sources coming out of it. Kahua'o, second to the last one, is the College of Ed's curriculum that they've created using this material. And then the last one is a Vimeo production of what we do. It just came out, it was maybe 20 minutes long. And I thought if we had lots of time, I'd play it, but we talked it up. So it's there for you. But this PowerPoint will be available for you. What I want you to walk away with is that, for a long time, we knew something was there. It was like an archaeological site. You knew that it was there. And you didn't know if it was hiding a trash heap or a treasure trove. We excavated it. I think we found a 5-story library. Basically, that's really it. It feels like we've discovered a library. We've got the lights on the first 3 floors. 2/5 of these newspapers have never been found. But 3 floors will keep us busy for a few generations. And so there it is. It's there. It's accessible to all of you. So what you going to do with that? Mahalo.